Okay, I have the green light to get started. So let me say welcome. We are so glad that you have joined us today. This is the third in our series of webinars called Deskside. The point of these is to really bring experts from Packard Hospital and Stanford Children's Health to all of you in our community on topics that are really relevant for you and in our community, and to really make that connection between you and Packard. I'm Cynthia Brandt, and I am CEO of the Lucille Packard Foundation for Children's Health, and I'm so glad to welcome you today. We are going to go on a really exciting journey with my colleague, Dr. Arash Anoushirvani. He is the medical director, I want to get this right, of the Children's Health Teen Van. The teen van is on the front lines every day. I heard that they were just out yesterday in East Palo Alto fighting health inequities in our community. So it's inspiring work in the community. As you'll hear, it also depends on support from the community to make it possible. So I want to encourage you, grab a snack for the road, buckle in, and let's tag along with Arash, who's first up going to give us a glimpse of this clinic on wheels.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you today and share some of the work that we do. First off, I'd just like to say, you know, often when people think of a health van or a van, I think in their minds, initially, they think of like a van that you might see on Scooby-Doo with, you know, Shaggy and Scooby jumping out of this little brown van. And as you can see, our van, it's kind of an understatement to call it a van. It really is, it's a 39-foot specially modified RV. Happens to be in blue, which are the colors of one of our initial funders and supporters, the Children's Health Fund. That's, you know, that we drive around and, to different locations and see partner sites and see patients at. This picture happened to be taken in front of Los Altos High School. And just one quick thought on that is that, you know, we go to 8 or 9 different sites a month throughout the year. And we go to sites that sometimes might surprise people as to, you know, I didn't realize that there were kids who were uninsured or didn't have health care just in our backyard. And, you know, we go to communities like Los Altos, like Mountain View and San Mateo, different places where in the very communities that, you know, appear to be fairly well off, there are pockets and communities that have a lot of needs, and their youth have a lot of needs. And so just as an explanation of this particular picture, but that's the outside of our van. And I think we're going to continue our virtual tour. The van is, you know, the first time you step into it, it's kind of a remarkable thing. You step up and there's a little hallway. And on either end of the van or of the mobile home, there are 2 exam rooms. This is the exam room in the back. This is the one I typically see patients in. And, you know, it's really set up like any other exam room that I've ever been in and worked in. We have everything set up that we need, blood pressure cuffs, you know, the exam table, the otoscope, ophthalmoscope, we have a sink, we have you know, all the supplies that we need. We have a refrigerator with vaccines and medications. We're a full pharmacy. All of that stuff is on the van. We have an area where our nurse, it's not pictured here, where our nurse does vital signs. There's a bathroom for samples. We have a blood draw area, a waiting area, although these days most of the waiting occurs outside for obvious reasons. But anyway, so this just gives you a sense of what our exam rooms and the vans look like. A quick comment on the technology. Sorry if we could go back once again. You may have noticed that there's a couple of video screens here and there, and those were courtesy of Samsung. But you know, we have used those in the past for health education when we have time to show things on the web. Brain development, all sorts of different health-related things that we can kind of show and interact with a young person on so that they get better idea of their own health. Sorry, the next slide. And you know, we will talk about this in a little bit, but this is just a recent picture from some of our COVID testing that we've been doing at various sites throughout the Bay Area as well. So sorry, it's a brief tour, but we wanted to give you a sense of just kind of what the van looks and feels like, and how much like an exam room it really is, or like a mobile, like a clinic that it really is.
Yeah, it's a lot more like a clinic than like a van, as you say. I think we're all really into van life right now, but yours is so exciting, and I just am so glad to see the inside of it. And thanks for taking us on a little tour. I know that you have worked on the teen van earlier in your career during your training, and have just been back with us at Stanford and Packard for a year this time as medical director of the teen van. So I think we'd all just like to hear kind of how you came to focus on adolescents and adolescent medicine, and especially why you came back to the teen van.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, strangely enough, I realized I wanted to work with teenagers and adolescents and young adults when I was a ripe old 17 years of age. Um, I actually kind of remember the exact moments, or kind of remember that time period. I was having a blast at a YMCA leadership camp in the mountains outside of Southern California, and we were rudely kind of interrupted from finding ourselves when we were told we have to listen to a 20-minute talk from this local business leader. So we all kind of scrambled into this room, and I don't remember really what he said, and I only have a vague sense, an outline of kind of what he looked like and what his hair was like. And I just remember that this old guy is probably in his late 30s at the time, mind you, right? um, he really made me think about myself and my choices, my role in the world. He didn't talk about anything deep, but it really kind of affected me for weeks and even months afterwards. And I just kind of was thinking, it blew me away that some adult who didn't know me and would never see me again could just have such an impact on my young mind. And as I kind of reflected on that, which was a weird thing to do at age 17, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do for others. And I knew that I wanted to help young people see themselves and their lives differently than kind of the narrative that our society generally has around teenagers and adolescents. So that's kind of the adolescent medicine piece. And as for the van, you're right. I trained with Dr. Ammerman, the founder and the previous medical director of the van in the early 2000s. And both he and our patients taught me so much about how to work with young people, how to bring out their strengths, how to help them see their own potentials in a way that I just hadn't really experienced before. And when Dr. Ammerman retired, it just felt right to come back and be a part of this program and try to continue to help it make a difference in the health and the lives of young people. One thing I'll say too is that, and this was true for me too, but I think when I first started, many people have a lot of beliefs about youth who are homeless or involved in the juvenile justice system or in foster care or are abusing substances or who are living in this country undocumented. And my experience has been that my patients who've experienced, one or more of these things, often many of them at the same time, are just like other young people, but with much, much harder lives. And, when I think about it, they could have been me and I could have been them at age 17 if our life circumstances had been switched. So in a way, this work for me has become like almost a social justice issue, both personally and professionally. And if nothing else, I mean, to answer your question, I blame my family and my cultural background for their emphasis on justice and for doing what's right in the world. And some of those animated discussions around the dining room table when I was growing up.
Wow, it's like the power of those early experiences in shaping this path that you've been on since then is incredible to hear as a story. And I think I hope the 17-year-olds I know right now are listening to some adult somewhere, and that they're having some of the thoughtful introspection that you did, and that leading on this path of social justice and seeing kids anew, and giving them this new opportunity. I really resonate with that social justice piece of what you're doing. one of the things I think I just want to pick up on in what you said about sometimes the misperceptions that we have about kids, but also about our community. And I think it'd be helpful if you told us a little bit more about some of the disparities you see in the health right in this local community.
Sure. I mean, it's hard to know where to start because there's a lot, but I mean, adolescents in general, there are barriers with adolescents in general. So they don't want to see the doctor, they don't want to go to the clinic, they don't want to admit that there's anything wrong, they may not even know that there's something going on. This is just how I live or who I am. So there's all of that, and we see that a lot in all adolescents. But we also see so many issues that affect the lives and health of the young people we serve. And like you said, literally in our backyards, whether it's poverty, food insecurity, housing insecurity, homelessness, violence in the home and in the community, ongoing childhood and ongoing actually emotional traumas. They have a lot of unmet needs that, like I said, they don't even realize they may need help with, and don't even know where to start with. And one of the things that I think many people in adolescent medicine see are that often the services, there are services available throughout the community. There are lots of wonderful organizations and places to go, but sometimes they're not available in the places or in the forms that are most accessible, and also best kind of developmentally suited to adolescents. And like we were kind of hinting at before, even though theoretically every child in California and every community should have access to health insurance coverage and should be clear, at least somewhat close to a community clinic or a federally qualified health center or whatever, many of our patients don't even know that they could be insured, that there are clinics that would be willing to see them. Some of them don't have the capacity to actually go get the care that they need, whether that's because of psychological and mental health issues, chronic, stress and trauma in their lives, transportation issues, financial issues. And, a lot of it for some of the communities that we serve really comes down to an inability to trust institutions that are supposed to be available to help them. We're seeing that today, these days, with issues around racism that are real and have long histories. We're also seeing that, with the issues of authorities in our police officers and other authorities in our communities, that there are young people that just cannot and do not trust the people that are there, supposed to be there to theoretically to help them, and that includes healthcare too. Some people have had bad experiences, so there are a lot of barriers and kind of inequities and issues that we see in the communities that we serve. I'd also say that for many of our youth, especially that we see on the teen van, it's not just one of those things. It's often a pretty toxic combination of a lot of those things. So it could be poverty and violence in the home and the community. It could be, just a community that's safe for some of them, but they are housing insecure and have trouble getting food. And I mean, it's a combination of these things that we see really affect our patients. And your question actually, I mean, really reminds me of of many of our patients, but one of our patients in particular, we just saw a few miles south of the Stanford campus this past year. A 15-year-old boy, and the school sent him to us, the school that we were partnering with. I think it was actually Mountain View High School, or in that area anyway. And the school brought him to us because they wanted to make sure he was up to date on his vaccines so that he could attend class, and so we see him, and it was pretty clear that he was pretty down, and he was in need of a shower, and he definitely needed some new clothes, or at least have his clothes washed. And after talking with him for a little bit, it turned out that his family of 4 had been forced to live in a small RV that they had somehow gotten behind a local Ranch 99 market. And it was really, it had to do with a lot of the costs of healthcare that his sister's severe health issues had caused and this sort of thing. So they were having a hard time. And in that context, they were also what they felt like they were being harassed. I mean, they were constantly being ticketed by the city for living in this parking lot. Like food was difficult. The parents' work schedules were difficult. But amongst all of this, what really stuck out to me was, for me, was the patient's, what the most stressful part of his day that he was describing to me was having to ride his little, his I think she was 8 at that time, his 8-year-old sister's little pink bike that was too small for him, 2 miles from that Ranch 99 to his school, or risk being late. Like if he had to walk or if he had to run or if he had to take 3 buses to get there, he was going to be late. So that was really stressful because it led to teasing, some bullying. His hygiene didn't help either, because he didn't have access to hygiene products and a clothes washer and things like that. And it was really affecting his mental health, and it was really affecting his ability to learn in school. He was getting in trouble for being late. He was getting in trouble for being distracted or upset. So just think, after dealing with his shots, getting him up to date so he could actually go to school and be within the law, addressing a couple of his skin concerns that were pretty minor, and connecting with our social worker, we were eventually able to find a donor who was willing to give him a more suitable bike. And he was thrilled, and that didn't solve all of his problems, but sometimes it's these little things that can make a really huge difference in health as well as the life and kind of experience of young people that we see.
And it's such an like that's so powerful. It's so horrible to be a kid and a teenager and be embarrassed and be bullied, and that's just really visceral. The pink bike and how humiliating that would be, for almost any kid, boy in high school. Um, I'm glad you got to take care of his concerns, and I'm so glad you found him a different bike.
He was
Um,
happy about that.
yeah, that's an amazing story, Raj. I want to ask a little bit about the connection to Stanford, and this is something that, as you said, Dr. Ammerman has been doing for a really long time. The teen van, and just if you can talk to us a little bit about the connection to Packard and to Stanford.
Sure. I mean, I have to say the teen van, I think there are now maybe 2 or 3 throughout the country, but ours was the first van dedicated to teens and young adults. I mean, it's a really unique and special resource, especially for young people who are just going through tough times in their lives. I'll say we have an intensely committed and dedicated team, which is, I can tell you who works with us. So we have an assistant manager who's also a medical assistant. We have another medical assistant, a nurse practitioner, a licensed social worker, a registered dietitian, and a driver, and who doubles as a registrar, in addition to a physician, who's me. And every one of us is there and has a role in this work because we care about the lives and health of teens and young adults in need, and because the needs really cross all kind of disciplines in a way. It's not just a medical problem that we see. We're seeing these social problems, we're seeing mental health problems, reproductive health problems, all sorts of things. And it really does take a team of caring adults to make a difference in the lives of many of the youth that we see who've been through so much and are continue to go through so much. So it's unique. It takes a fair amount of resources in terms of people power to do it. In addition to that, the van itself, it just allows us to do things that traditional clinics just can't do. We can both literally and figuratively meet young people where they are at and where they feel comfortable. We don't ask them to leave their comfort zones to come to a clinic that's across town. We don't tell them to get a ride or take 3 buses to get there. We don't force them to or put them at risk for going to a clinic where they might run into a parent or a family friend and have to explain why they're even there, especially for those who are going through sensitive issues, sensitive concerns. We drive up, set up the van, and currently tents at a school or a community center or a local park or a community college with whom we have a strong partnership with. And we only ask these young people to take the 3 steps up to one of the van's clinic rooms. And showing up for them where they are is such a critical part of building the trust that we need to have in order to help them improve their health, address their health issues and concerns, and begin to make a difference in their lives. And sorry, if I may, I should also say that it does take more than just a committed, high-functioning team and this special big blue van to do this work. And over the past couple of decades of working with vulnerable populations and vulnerable youth, one of the things that I've really learned is that the organization you work with or the institution you work within and its leadership really, really matter. And as a university, I think, getting to your question, Stanford really has innovation kind of built within its DNA from its founding, I think. Thinking differently, breaking down entrenched ways of doing things, working across traditional disciplines to solve real world problems. I mean, I think these are all parts of an environment and a culture that brings people together, like-minded colleagues together, and sometimes make what seems impossible sometimes possible. And so I would say, yes, our connection to Stanford and its affiliated children's hospital really matter and really make a difference in our ability to do what we see we need to do.
Well, we're all 100% behind you on that, and see the impact of bringing a resource like Stanford to deal with some of the inequalities that you were talking about earlier, and how important that is as a part of our mission. I want to get to this question, an interesting question that came up for me when I saw your photos a minute ago about COVID. But I also just want to ask kind of a practical question. How do you figure out like where to go? And you said something about a high school kind of requesting your help for the one young man you told us about. How do you figure that out in general, where you're going to go?
Well, there's no real formula, but some of it is through community relationships and kind of setting up long-term relationships with people in communities who work with the young people or the families that we target, and really beginning to learn where there are these pockets of people who don't get services or don't have access to the services that they need. Part of it is that people call us and say, hey, we heard about, now that we've been around for almost a quarter century, we heard about what you guys do on the van. We recently have this whole, we have 4 classrooms of young people who none of them speak English and are all here unaccompanied minors, and we need, our job is to teach them, but we know they have a lot of health and mental health issues based on their experiences. Can you come? And we don't do a lot of one-offs. We really do try to create long-lasting partnerships with different sites, and to really they get to know us, we get to know how they work, they know their students or young people really well, and they can say, well, you told me about what's going on in your life. The van is coming next week. Is it okay if we put you on their list to be seen? And so we build relationships over time, but we do get a lot of requests, and we can't meet the need at every place. And we really try to think about places where we can have long-term impacts, not just going in one time and doing something and then saying that was great and then leave. Because again, there's issues of trust and credibility, and working with communities. One-offs don't tend to work very well in that way.
I love that idea of the ecosystem, trying to help kids, and that you have that you're part of that with different schools and different communities. So one of the things that I think we're all heightened sensitivity about trust, and especially around testing for the coronavirus. And I saw that in one of your photos. And I just want to hear, how is that impacting the work of the Team Van?
So interestingly, so that, that 1 week in March, middle of March, it felt like our entire world changed. And as for the Teen Van, I mean, our patients were suddenly stuck at home. Our community partners were shut down. We had no idea how widespread the virus was, and whether we or our patients or our families might have been unknowingly exposed. And no one really knew how or when this would all end and how it would impact everything that we were doing. you know, so, I mean, what we did was, I mean, we felt really strongly that we needed to continue supporting our patients, especially those with chronic health needs. And somewhere along the line, we sensed that we could contribute something somehow to dealing with the COVID-19 response, especially given how chaotic a lot of it is felt. This is brand new. We haven't dealt with this in a long time, and there's a lot of other things going on. So, I'll just tell you the story of kind of how we got to where we got, if that's okay. But we took 2 weeks off. Let's just say that. Not really. But we did take 2 weeks to sort of just figure out what we could do as a team. Like, this is weird. How do we deal with this? And so, we kind of focused on some things. The first thing we did was try to focus on our patients. So we checked in on all of our patients that we'd seen in the last 3 to 6 months by phone, see how they were doing, what they needed, what new stressors were going on for everybody in their community and their family. Simultaneously, our assistant clinic manager starts securing available PPE from the hospital and even from donations from people and foundations who are finding and locating and providing PPE. We worked really closely with the hospital to get telehealth up and running for our program. It was a goal we had that was going to be like 6 months to a year out, and it got up and running in 3 days. And that was really so that we could see our highest need patients electronically, because we didn't know when we were going to be able to go out again. And then as the days wore on and a couple of weeks passed, it became clear that there were some patients who really needed to be seen in person. So we set up kind of these special clinic sessions at our partner sites to see those people who needed to be seen in person with precautions and social distancing and everything. So we did all that initially, but then beyond that, it was becoming clearer and clearer throughout the country and throughout the world that our patients and their families were going to be on the front lines of this illness and this virus. And many of the adults and their families wouldn't be able to work from home. They were coming from cramped living situations, multi-generational families, 8 or 9 people in a couple of rooms. And those situations made it really likely that the virus was going to spread really rapidly and take hold in these communities. And that's kind of what led us to approach the hospital and the foundation about developing a coronavirus testing program for the communities that we serve, for the patients and their families. And I shouldn't have been surprised, but the response of the hospital and of the foundation and everybody that we talked to was just remarkable. Hospital quickly started working through the operational issues. You guys at the foundation and the philanthropic community rapidly stepped up and found and provided resources that we needed to basically do something that we never had done before and never thought we would be doing, right? I didn't go into medical school thinking I'd end up testing, hundreds of uninsured and underserved youth and adults during a pandemic in some of our highest risk communities. But that's what we ended up being able to do. And so on a typical van day, go ahead, sorry, I didn't.
No, I'm just like, yeah, no, you did not expect that. None of us expected this. I'm just like picturing how this was for you on the front lines and for the kids that you're talking about, and their circumstance and the high risk that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think this is where the team approach and having the support of all of the institutions that work with us really make a difference. It's stressful, you don't know what's going to happen, but you have this team that works together to try to figure things out and do the best you can. And what's interesting now, so on a typical van day now, if there is a typical day, one set of our staff is available to see youth who need, who have physical, mental health, reproductive health, or nutritional health concerns, either via telehealth or in person in our teen van tents, just to keep the air as clean as possible, although the smoke has made that more difficult. And at the same time, we have another set of our staff testing an additional 30 to 80 patients for coronavirus. And so far, in the last 2.5 months, a little bit over 2.5 months, we've tested almost 600 people, aged 3 to 85 years old, believe it or not. Because like I said, we decided that we were going to try to make sure that we were supporting the young people, but also any of the adults and family members that are part of their lives. And we're at a point now that we can comfortably test with our small team. We can comfortably test about 100 people each day we go out if needed. So one other thing I don't want to forget to mention, which is that so, we typically give out hygiene products and school products, as I mentioned before, school supplies and things like that, if young people need it. Um, but during this time, our social worker also was able to get funding to start dealing with some of the social determinants affecting our patients' health, including, so now we have some funding available to provide food boxes for youth and their families who are facing food insecurity, and even some financial assistance for living expenses for some of the hardest hit families we see, who either have family members who are positive for COVID and therefore can't work for several weeks, or just are, have lost their jobs for other reasons. So overall, I think that this pandemic has been quite a shift for our work. But it's really clear we could not have done any of it without the combined support of the entire organization and philanthropy. I mean, that just made all of this possible.
I love that. I'm simultaneously monitoring questions that are coming in on text and on chat on the meeting. And one person has already said, like, how can I help? And that's the spirit. Like, that's why we're all here doing this, because so many people want to help and support the kind of work that you're doing. I feel incredibly moved as you're telling us about this, and like, yeah, we need to generate more support to keep this work going. I find philanthropy, this is my life's work, as a true reason for hope. I would love to hear from you in terms of the Teen Van, kind of what gives you a sightline into the future, what gives you hope?
Well, I mean, so we obviously we live in very interesting times, and a lot of what we're doing is just kind of winging it these days. And what you heard was sort of our winging it, but it doesn't have to be a negative winging it, right? It does give us some flexibility, programmatically, intellectually, organizationally, to kind of plan creatively for the future. But there's actually a lot that gives me hope. I think the most important thing, and I think the thing that I think about first, is just the young people that we serve, and that the Teen Van program has served over the last 24 years. We have seen patients, quote, graduate from our services and go on, after age 20. We tend to have patients move on to kind of more traditional adult healthcare services after around 25, 26. So we've seen these young people go on and have productive and fulfilling independent lives. And many of them do keep in touch with some of our staff members that they've known for 15 years or 10 years or 20 years. And they've told us how important having the van services and support during turbulent times, during difficult times in their lives, really was, that support was essential and critical to them. And even though youth, youth, even with the most difficult experiences and stories, that they're remarkably resilient. But it can make a huge difference to have adults in their lives that care and that support them and listen to them and give them a boost or two during the hardest times. And that's really kind of the mission of our van, and that's kind of what we do, both medically, but also psychologically, emotionally, and the other ways that we talked about. So it's these young people where you see that even though they've gone through hard things, they come out the other side and they have a life that they can be proud of. Like that gives me a lot of hope, and I think that's something that we continue to do and want to do. The other thing I'd say, and I hope I don't sound like a broken record here, but that really gives me hope is just the support our team has experienced for the Teen Van program as a whole. As I said before, the Stanford Children's Health, the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, the Lucille Packard Foundation, the entire philanthropic community. We cannot do anything that we do without the philanthropy and the support of all of the people that are kind of stand behind us. And all of these people have come through in ways that we couldn't even have imagined a year ago. Yeah, and like I said, doing things that we couldn't have even thought we might be doing. So there's a pride, I think, in being able to kind of build this bridge for young people and their families across the tough times into future lives that are better. And it takes all of us to do that. And all of that really gives me hope, even in kind of a difficult time right now.
Mhm. It just reminded me also of your own story of saying, this adult whose name is lost to history spoke to, you and some of your friends at camp, and it made a difference for you. And we're talking about kids who are in really, really hard circumstance, and the power and impact that some help and some support, medical, mental health, as you've said, um, can provide. So I hope that someone sitting here in our shoes 20 or 30 years from now, maybe 40 years from now, is talking to all these kids that you have helped, and that a bunch of them are saying like, oh yeah, I was inspired. This guy Arash who helped on this van that did COVID testing when I couldn't get anywhere else. I want to ask another really pragmatic question. How do the people you see, do they have to pay at all for the services that you guys are providing?
No, everything is free. So all the services that we provide are free, and that that removes a lot of barriers for a lot of people, especially the young people that we see. That includes the COVID testing. We have philanthropic funding to do that. But no, everything that we do is free. And I would say, even young people who are on chronic medications, whether that's for diabetes or whether that's for depression, ADHD, anxiety, our program and the philanthropic funding that we receive covers the cost of all of that for all the young people that we see.
Make that possible. Yeah. What about, help us see, what does it take to get the van ready in these, the idea that you're setting up tents seems overwhelming to me. So just give us a sense of how you pull all of this together.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. I think for doctors and nurses, I guess, who may work in a regular clinic where you sort of, and that included me for a very long time. You kind of walk in and everything's there, and where all the supplies are, and you just kind of start clinic. Yeah,
So easy
that's kind of
for those
totally. But
doctors.
yeah, it's like piece of cake, right? No, it's fun. It's fun and funny, and I think it really speaks to just the incredible team that we have too. That we all get to the site that we need to get to. The van is there, and we just get to work. And these days it does include putting up 3 or 4 tents sometimes for the for registration, for regular medical clinics visits, and for testing and all the So it takes a lot. And I'll say that our clinic manager and MA and our driver take the brunt of the early morning stuff. They get to the van, they get the medications on board, they get the vaccinations on board into the refrigerator. All the supplies that cannot remain on the van that must be brought onto the van for clinic are brought on. And that's all like, an hour or two before clinic even starts. And then the van moves to the site, and then we all help with everything else that needs to be done, including putting up tents and all that. The computers are brought out, the Wi-Fi is set up, the tables are put out for registration outside. I mean, it's kind of like a circus. It's fun and funny, but it's awesome. Within 20 minutes, you've got a full clinic in a parking lot or on the side of on the sidewalk or wherever we happen to be setting up, and there you go. And then at 6 to 7 hours later, all of that comes back down, gets placed in the van, and then the van, our assistant clinic manager and driver take all that stuff and back to our office and unload and all that. It's a resource intensive process.
It's a production.
It's a
It's a
production.
production. Yeah. Well, I love the motivation though, is meeting kids where they are. Yeah. And now with COVID testing, meeting families where they are. I'm getting a lot of questions about COVID-19 and the van. And so help us see into you decide the importance of testing families. What kind of prevalence have you seen? Do you have a plan to keep going with the testing? What about when there is a vaccine? So just kind of walk us through that whole picture.
Yeah. So, we thought it was really important. It was clear that, testing was going to be constrained, except for people, whether if you're an NBA star or if you're in the government or wherever you're, like that testing was going to be available. But for the highest, I mean, it just seemed not right that those at highest risk were going to also have the hardest chance to get tested. And so that just fit right into our mission and what we needed to do. And so it was clear to us that we had to do testing. It was clear to us that if we just focused on teenagers, A, they probably wouldn't come very often, and B, we wouldn't be testing that many people. And the reality is that a lot of children, we're learning more about this, but a lot of children and young adults, well, a lot of children anyway, and younger teenagers are getting it from family members who are essential workers going out and having to work, like we talked about before. So it just didn't make sense to focus only on the 12 to 25-year-olds that we typically see. And that's why we decided to expand it to the families. And it just made sense because they're not living, those who are living in homes are not living in a vacuum. They're living with other people. They're housing insecure, all this stuff. So it just made sense to do that. In terms of how long, so we've been doing it all summer. We anticipate that it's going to go on. The need is going to be there at least through the end of the fall and probably through the winter. And I think, as we look around at schools and colleges and communities that are trying to reopen, their institutions and of work and of learning, it's going to be a rough transition back to some semblance of normal. And there's going to be ups and downs, and it's going to be a vexing problem. And I think that testing the highest risk communities in the Bay Area that we serve it's going to be a need that continues at least for 3 to 6 months, probably longer. So we're going to try to keep doing that. And the other thing is that as far as vaccines are concerned, so there is no coronavirus vaccine yet. But there has been a lot of emphasis placed on flu vaccines. And so one of the other things that we're sort of winging it with is, we're going to start having basically flu vaccine clinics where we go to a site that we know, and we're just going to be open to young people and their families and try to give as many flu vaccines as we can to people who typically have not gotten those, to protect them from the other virus that is starting back up during this season. But eventually we anticipate that if there's a coronavirus vaccine, that we can be a small part of a response. No one knows how to get millions and millions of vaccines out once it's available to everybody who needs it. And I can guarantee you that very few people, unfortunately, are thinking about how to get them to the communities that are most in need and have the least resources. So we feel strongly that we can be part of that effort. So we hope and anticipate that, in the next 3 to 6 months, 9 months, whenever optimistically we get a vaccine, that we would be running full day long, mobile vaccination clinics in the communities that we serve and potentially beyond, depending on the need for mobile services. But a lot of it depends. And like I said, the institutions that we work with have been incredibly supportive. But it also really depends on the resources that we have available. And I think one of the things that's really cool that we've experienced that's really cool is that we're a small program, and so we can be pretty nimble. The 7 of us, there's not a lot of bureaucracy that we have, and when resources come in, we pretty quickly can translate that into service in the community and to try to meet more needs. And so this is all new for us. I mean, we do give vaccines, but we don't do like flu vaccine clinics and coronavirus vaccine clinics. And we haven't done that in the past. And I think it's all new to us, but it's also cool that we can sort of move and change what we do a little bit to meet real needs in communities that we serve, hopefully in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys, do you collect data? Do you have a research component of what you're doing?
So yes and no. We are primarily, obviously, a service project or program. But one of the disparities that you see in underserved communities is that a lot fewer people are studying them often and trying to find new ways and better ways of serving a lot of their unmet needs. And so, we have been collecting the data. Obviously, we get results and we know how many patients we've tested. And I guess part of your question was what prevalence are we seeing? And we've seen about somewhere between 5 and 8% positivity rate. And I think the last I heard yesterday, it was much lower than that throughout the state. And we don't have a representative sample, so that's,
Right.
take it for what it's worth. But
It's exactly to your point.
yeah, so we have higher, I mean, we have a pretty high positivity rate. But we do anticipate being able to, we hope to actually be able to publish some of what we're doing as a combination, maybe not research. I mean, we still have to get ethical sort of oversight and approvals, but partly as just sort of like a how-to almost, because some of what we're done, like how do you set this up and how do you do it in a mobile clinic? And I think we and some of our colleagues throughout the country might be able to contribute to kind of the understanding of how do you rapidly ramp up and do something you haven't done for communities that haven't had to do this before, and then in addition, sort of some more information about prevalence and what we're seeing.
That's a way that you can scale up the impact of this teen van during this time of the pandemic and beyond, to help others do it. Well, I want to give you the opportunity. I think we want to know, one, like, is there something that you've really learned recently that you want to continue post-pandemic? But I also want to give you a chance to kind of tell us, like, is there another, like, a story of the person that that you think of when you think of who you're trying to help? Is there someone and to sort of help us see that?
I mean, I think there's so many stories that are impactful that sometimes my head gets kind of filled with them, and sort of they become. Sometimes it's easier to kind of share an amalgamation almost, and I think the stories that I think are most kind of that are emotionally kind of most impactful to me are when we have a lot of young people. So we have people who have a lot of really difficult situations, like really extreme, but we also have young people who are doing okay. They've been through a lot. Maybe their parents came here illegally, but they're citizens, and they're having they're doing okay in school. They're working hard, but they're on the edge. Their family's on the edge financially. As a result, the young person who might be doing really well academically is also on the edge, because if something happens at home, someone gets sick or someone loses a job or things like that, then they get pulled. They have to help, either because they're asked to or because they feel this incredible need to help their family. And so it's these young people on the edge of being able to work towards a better life, but are at incredibly high risk for some small thing, difficult situation happening in their life or in their family's life that could push them over the edge in the other way. Those are the young people that really stick with me, because the potential is there for such a wide range of life experiences for them and adult world experiences for them. And you want to root for them to go in the direction that they want, where they can live a successful life, have children who are successful and independent, wonderful lives. But circumstances can just push them over the edge the other way. So I'm sorry I don't have one story.
I love that.
But there are so many young people that we see that are just living on that edge, and I think that's where the van really can play a huge role, whether it's helping them with stress and anxiety and mental health related stuff, or even giving them the supplies they need to be able to continue going to school because their family can't afford it, or food, or whatever we can do can help to kind of stack things towards the side of success and a better life for them.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Arash, for sharing this with us. I have to tell you, for all of you out there who sent questions that we didn't get to, I'm so sorry. Let's continue the conversation. One piece, Arash, that I'm very interested in, you mentioned food and food insecurity. That's a huge way in which you can help. So there are many topics we can continue. We're going to send a note to everyone who participated. We'll send you an email tomorrow with all kinds more information about the teen van. Of course, we'll ask you to support this work and to ask everybody you know in this community and beyond to support this important work. And I hope that everybody is feeling some of the hope that you talked about, Arash, of you're seeing kids who, as you say, are having really hard circumstances, and those kids are the reason you feel hope. And that really buoys my spirit today, and I hope that all of us leaving this webinar go out into the world with that same kind of inspiration and hope that you've shared today. So thank you so much all for participating, and we'll see you at the next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.